The Winter Grazing Action Group was established in early 2020 at the start of this year, and they're made up of 15 representatives from industry organisations, government, vets, farmers and other rural professionals. It's tasked with implementing recommendations to improve animal welfare here in New Zealand in our winter grazing systems. The Winter Grazing Action Group is aware that farmers are looking for guidance to help them understand what may be coming down the pipeline into what will be current winter practices that will be acceptable as this task force comes about its recommendations. So we're joined now by Lindsay Burton, who's the chair of the Winter Grazing Action Group. Lindsay, I have here some short-term expected outcomes for animal welfare. We have to point out, though, this is not a legal minimum standard yet. Could you please give us a bit of an update on why the task force was formed and what type of conversations have come to the point of having at least some short-term expected outcomes?
Okay, so the original reason for the group being established was because there was a task force established by the minister originally, and that was to examine the key issues that surrounded intensive winter grazing. As a consequence of that group report, which made a series of recommendations, the action group, which I chair, was established, and it is really giving effect to the recommendations from the original task force chaired by John Hellstrom. So the group was established in February this year, and it has come through initially, one of its key outputs has been the short-term expectations document that sets out for farmers clear understanding of what is expected. It is not regulation, nor is it intended to be regulation, but rather guidance information to achieve good farm practice when it comes to animals being grazed intensively.
And good practice, obviously not best practice, is being based on science and the recommendations of vets to achieve and improve the current animal welfare outcomes. There'll be a lot of farmers around New Zealand listening and watching right now, Lindsay, that say they're very aware of animal welfare over winter grazing periods. However, it's about bringing everyone along on this journey, isn't there? And I mean, our wintering systems have a lot to answer for. So let's work through these 7 outcomes and start with the ability to allow our animals here in New Zealand to give birth in the right environment. What do you mean by that exactly?
It means that the animals are able to lie down, give birth in a situation where in fact appropriate mothering can occur. And the intention with intensive winter grazing is not to have animals giving birth on crops, but rather be off crops. So clearly one of the key things to know is when animals are expected to calve, and to ensure that they provided the right type of pasture or other system bases rather than on an intensive cropping situation.
And of course, as we continue to work through these 7 different outcomes, we do take on board that there is a lot of farmers around New Zealand that are not doing that, giving birth on crop. However, it is all about working together in this task force to get that. Moving on to the next one, this is something, especially with the freshwater regs and pugging, etc., where I have heard rhetoric from farmers saying, well, what about an adverse weather event? What is the task force's recommendation around preparation?
So this is clear that adverse weather events can occur from time to time. So you need to have very good plans in place. One, to anticipate what could occur. Secondly, to know what you're going to do should such an event occur. It may be shifting back fences, it may be giving extra breaks, but it is doing the things that most farmers are doing extremely well. So just like your mention of a lot of animals giving birth on crops, that is not the norm, and in fact, if the planning is right, that should be really occurring. And most farmers, if we look at what's actually happened this winter, have done extremely well to achieve that outcome. But there are some that need further plans in place to ensure that they get the right and expected outcomes.
And planning for winter feeding is something I've seen come a long way, especially in the last decade, in terms of planning out those breaks with that site baleage along the breaks as well. Are we seeing the ability to provide feed in the right places and getting our actual winter grazing management better sorted for the right nutrients?
I think we certainly have seen some very good farmers doing that historically, and we've seen rapid change occur with many, many farmers this year to ensure that they understand what plans they need in place, moving stock as required, and ensuring that the feed is accessible along with good access to water.
What type of recommendations, if you're an owner or a manager listening to this episode or this program right now, what I really enjoyed about this is setting up a bit of a system in the shed when you're having those health and safety meetings and those general farm management meetings to say, what are the opportunities to improve? Having that post-winter chat to sit down and go, what could we do differently?
Well, I think that's really important. I think it's an important exercise that should be going on all the time. As you review how things are going, and at the end of it, reviewing what one could have done better. There are many opportunities, not just within your own farming system, but also talking to rural professionals and other farmers to actually understand the lessons they've learned and the system changes they've made and what's worked and what may not have worked quite as well.
Lindsay, is 15 representatives across the industry, as we said there in the introduction. What type of feedback are you getting across the board in terms of general behaviour changes in industry and sort of that peer support around that as well? Because as I've continuously said on this program, all it takes is one photo to bring our industry down.
That's right. The industry support, along with MPI support, has been very, very good. Industry groups have made sure that a lot of the material that's required for farmers, the advice, is being provided to them, either by written material or through rural professionals or running workshops. So there's widespread industry support and widespread recognition of the changes that are required.
I mean, I tell you what, I'm not going to lie. I am not alone in saying you drive past some situations that are very much on a roadside and you think that is just straight out dumb. How are we absolutely going to be able to change that when these particular farmers may not attend the likes of an industry organisation event on better winter grazing? How do we bring the bottom up, do you believe?
I think that's a joint effort from a large number of people, including people that observe that situation, neighbours. All those groups need to actually participate and actively work with those that they believe may not be achieving what should be achieved, and being prepared to actually have those hard conversations from time to time. At the same time, they also need to be actually recognise those that are doing extremely well and complimenting on them. So I think there's two things that need to happen. We need to make sure we are communicating effectively with all the people in the industry, and that does mean driving up the driveway, which did occur this year on a number of properties, and just pointing out what the options were and what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable.
Okay, so these recommendations, short term, have been extended out to 2021. You're positive about what you've seen already so far in this winter. What does it look like after that? Are we seeing regulation? And if so, who will be the regulator?
So the regulations are currently around freshwater, and while there are some components in those freshwater regulations that can impact on winter grazing, like pucking and slope, the regulator here is really MPI if we're looking for compliance, but it's under the more general Animal Welfare Act. Regulations shouldn't be needed to actually create the right situations. They should be a point of last resort rather than regulating just for the sake of it. So what we're looking to do is provide the guidance material to follow that up, to investigate cases where in fact concerns are expressed by any member of the public and other farmers, and then review that post-2021 to see whether in fact there is any need for any more legislative tools than already exist under the Animal Welfare Act.
Lindsay, before we go, would you like to paint a picture for us of what success would look like on an average, say, Southland dairy farm in terms of winter grazing management in your eyes?
Thank you. I'll not just confine it to Southland because the issue is about intensive winter grazing right across New Zealand. So that's the first thing. The most important thing, though, is to ensure that the farmers actually have done a lot of planning. They've clearly identified what are the feed requirements of the animals, what are the shelter requirements of the animals. They've identified that they have animals known in terms of stage of pregnancy, and success will then look like them following those plans and also responding in situations like adverse weather events appropriately so the animals are well fed and that their basic welfare needs are met.
No, thank you for clarifying that. Absolutely. It was just an example, and it is extended nationwide in terms of the short-term outcomes that the Minister wants to see in terms of us having an absolutely incredible winter grazing practice that we can hang our hat on globally. Lindsay Burton joining us there as the chair of the Winter Grazing Task Force Action Group that he put into place. And you may remember from a particular protest from an Angus Robertson a couple of years ago. And look, everything is improving into the right direction. I think everybody in New Zealand all wants a positive animal welfare outcome. It's just how we achieve it.
This is Sarah's Country.